morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 Grad Futures Forum, hosted by the Graduate School at Princeton University. We're delighted you could join us for the second year of this annual event and a unique week-long professional development conference solely focused on graduate students. Last year, we pivoted what was planned to be a one-day in-person conference to a three-day virtual event. This year, we expanded the format to meet the imperative of graduate student professional development at this moment, and to signal the graduate school's strong commitment to providing expanded support and to preparing our graduate students with the skills they need now and in the future. Ultimately, we hope these efforts will broaden the impact of the PhD within and beyond the academy at a time when the expertise of our doctoral students is so sorely needed in this world. The more than 38 sessions and 60 speakers throughout the week will cover national best practices in professional development, ways to plan, pivot, and recalculate, and will share overviews of bespoke immersive experiences, learning cohorts, mentorship programs, and programs in innovation and entrepreneurship. All keynote sessions will be live streamed, and our goals are to expose graduate students to diverse options, practical advice, share inspirational stories, and to accelerate connections among and between graduate students and graduate alumni. Please enter where you're joining us from in the chat and tell us what you're looking forward to at the Grad Futures Forum. You can enter your questions in the Q&A and our team will do our very best to respond. In just a few moments, I'll be joined by Cole Crittenden, Acting Dean and Deputy Dean of the Graduate School. I'll go ahead and share my slides. I'm delighted Cole could join me this morning to share a bit about the graduate school's priorities around professional development for our master's and PhD students and the evolution of those priorities. We'll also be sharing some highlights from year one of the Grad Futures initiative and a few goals for the coming year and beyond. Cole, we're delighted you could join us and welcome to the Grad Futures Forum.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Well, so again, we're so delighted to have you here to kick off the day one of the forum conference. You've played such an active role in elevating the priority of graduate student professional development over the years. So I thought maybe we'd frame some of the bigger questions that are top of mind as we think about graduate student professional development. In the homepage article last week, you were quoted with several big picture questions that you posed around fundamental questions that drive our thinking in this area and that have essentially served as the charge of the Grad Futures initiative. Can you share a little bit about the evolution of the graduate school's priorities?
Sure. So I've been at the graduate school now for almost 10 years, not quite 10 years. And I would say things have changed a lot in my tenure at the graduate school in this area in particular. We didn't start from scratch. I think it's always important to recognize our predecessors who did good work in this area. We're elevating this topic and this set of concerns, I think, to a new level, but we didn't start from zero. And in fact, as some of the people who are participating in the Grad Futures Forum and Kirshner, among others, will be able to tell participants, this topic has actually been a topic for decades in some cases on college campuses. So when I came to the graduate school, there had been good work done by my predecessor, David Redman, with some important campus partners, the writing program with Amanda Irwin-Wilkins, the McGraw Center with Carol Porter, and other important partners across campus, thinking about what it is that graduate students do and PhD students in particular do as they're earning a PhD. What kind of skills are they developing that are part of, but in some ways, separable from the the particular subject matter expertise that they're developing. So the writing program, for example, thought about this quite a bit as they thought how best to serve writers as PhD students. There were good programs in place and there were good partnerships in place. When I joined the graduate school, I was given responsibility for this area. We had some terrific partners at that time in the Office of Career Services, as it was then called. Amy Puzlkowski was at that point a member of that office, and she was a real cheerleader for this cause. And we did have, regular meetings around this topic. But I think what really galvanized things on Princeton's campus was the task force on the future of the graduate school, which was part of President I.S. Gruber's strategic planning initiative for the entire campus. So we had one task force specifically devoted to the future of the graduate school. And one of the work streams within that task force was on professional development for graduate students. And a couple of key recommendations came out of the task force's report. Among them was that the graduate school itself should probably have an assistant dean level position devoted to this programmatic area, that we should do much more by way of tracking career outcomes for our graduate alumni. We were doing a decent amount of that, but we weren't doing as much as we could have been doing. And that we should be helping departments to think much more about what they were doing, both around tracking, but also around curricular development. So we did create that position. We actually recruited Amy Puzlkowski away from you. You were at that point the director of the Career Services Center. Amy came and joined our office as an assistant dean. And then things sort of moved into high gear. And then the next major step was Sarah Jane Leslie's joining the office of the Dean of the Graduate School as dean. So she was appointed in 2018. And among her three strategic priorities was the professional development of graduate students, ensuring that our graduate students are able to make good use of their PhDs in whatever career outcomes they desire. And with that strategic goal, she was able to create what we now call GradFUTURES. It wasn't called that at the time. We didn't have a name for it when we first started imagining what a kind of central hub of focus around graduate student professional development might look like. We knew that it had to be visible, that it didn't need to act like a hub, that it needed to grow the kinds of programs that we were already doing. We needed a strategic focus around this work, something that, to be perfectly candid, I was not able to give it, given that the academic affairs is really my priority. And then we needed some funding for it as well. And through the incredibly generous support of some graduate alumni who care a lot about this particular topic, we did secure some seed funding that helped us launch what we now call GradFUTURES, which has scaled up, which has expanded what we're doing, which has grown so many of our programs and launched so many more, has engaged new partners, and has, again, really elevated the work that we're doing and made it visible for our graduate students. One of the important things that we had to do with launching this initiative was to hire an associate dean. And of course, that was you, Eva, when we then recruited you over from the Office of Career Development to the graduate school.
Well, thank you for that overview, because I do think it's so important to have the full context, of these efforts and the evolving priorities in this area. You mentioned visibility. And that's something the AAU, as you referenced, for many years, other professional associations and organizations have been looking at professional development. And so they frame this as the need for visible, valuable, and viable professional development initiatives for PhDs. We're going to hear a little bit more from professional associations and scholarly associations throughout the week. But yes, these efforts are all interconnected. Expanding and scaling has really been, the focus of our first year of Grad Futures. And it's been such a pleasure coming over from the Career Center to work with Amy Pizolkowski, as well as Assistant Dean James Van Wyk in this effort, and also all of the teams across the graduate school, because we are all focused on providing holistic support for graduate students. So our team interfaces with the Access, Diversity, and Inclusion team, as well as the Finance and Administration team and student life. So we all work together with your team as well in academic affairs. So I'll talk a little bit about our strategy and the way we really have framed the vision for professional development and the strategy for Grad Futures is around these 5 core pillars. Our vision is really that professional development becomes an intrinsic part of graduate education at Princeton, and that it really is intended to broaden the reach and the impact of the academic training by preparing our graduate students to make transformative contributions within diverse fields of endeavor. So when we think about these 5 pillars, what I thought we could do, Cole, is we'll kind of go pillar by pillar and have a little bit of a brief conversation about our efforts in year 1, and also tee up some of our goals for year 2 of Grad Futures.
Okay.
So in terms of the first pillar, designing and implementing a professional development model that would engage all graduate students and prepare them with the skills and competencies needed for career success across all fields. We spent the better part of the last year integrating and organizing all of the programs across campus into these 6 core competencies that you see on the slide. We feature campus experts, alumni, and industry partners, and in all of our programming. And essentially, we focus in on progressive learning, acquisition, and mastery of these skills and competencies. We're also focused on providing exposure to these diverse pathways, emerging fields, and industry trends across all sectors, and to providing immersive experiences such as fellowships, internships, interdisciplinary projects, and boot camps, and the like. Connections to graduate alumni and industry leaders and mentors are also critical to all of our programming efforts. Last year, we hosted more than 110 programs through the graduate school with approximately 2,700 graduate students, alumni, faculty, and staff in attendance. That was a significant effort across that first year, and again, our goals are to make sure that we continue to expand and to scale these efforts so that every graduate student has access to all of the programs and all of these immersive experiences and opportunities. Some of the programs we'll talk about throughout the week include our signature learning cohorts. These are designed to build interdisciplinary learning communities around a societal or industry trend. And we'll talk a lot more about fellowships and internships and boot camps later on in the week. Our critical, programming as well is actually sponsored by all of our campus partners across 40 plus campus offices and centers. What we've done is really to inventory all of the amazing programs that were offered across campus and start to organize them into each of these competency areas. We saw that last year, probably more than double the amount of programming that we hosted through the graduate school was hosted by campus partners across each of the competency areas. We also know that about 42% of our attendees were international graduate students, and about 38% were US minorities. So again, we're on this mission of understanding the unique needs of our graduate students and across years in their program, different years in their program, and different interest areas that they may have. We have had lots of conversations, you and I, about how do we measure sort of the impact of these programs, considering that it's more of a coalition-based effort with some of the programming sponsored through the graduate school and other programs sponsored through our campus partners. When we're thinking about some of those big picture questions you framed for us earlier, Cole. What are some of your thoughts around measuring the impact of these programs?
It's a good question. So as I said earlier, we've been thinking a lot about data, but the truth is when we started thinking about data, we focused mostly on what is it that our graduate students do? And the second stage of that was, do they need the PhD to do the thing that they're doing? That doesn't answer your question. Your question is, does the programming that we're offering, the programming that our partners on campus offer, does that make a difference? And that's a harder thing to get at, but I think, and I think you think there are ways to get at that. So one of those ways is through survey tools. We've done a very good job over the years with the help of Jed Marsh in the Provost's office of surveying both our enrolled students as well as our alumni. We asked them a lot of questions about competency development, skills development. We also asked them questions about what it is they want to do with their career when they're an enrolled student. We ask them that through what's called the Enrolled Student Survey, which we offer every 3 years. When they finish up through the Exit Survey, we ask them questions about what they wanted to do when they arrived, what they want to do now, how they explain the shift. And that allows us, among other things, to see whether at certain points when we began certain kinds of programs, we think they made a difference in the thinking of our graduate students and how prepared they believe they are, in the kinds of careers they think they would like to successfully apply their graduate level training. You've talked about launching a new pre-matriculation survey that allows us to gauge what's going on with them even before they arrive, so that we have the full picture. We ask them what's going on once they're here, and we ask them what's going on when they're about to leave. We ask them what they're up to after their alumni, but in fact, we've never asked them what they were thinking about professional skill development and career outcomes before they got here. And so that's a new thing that we've started asking. We'll start that for the first time this fall. So that's one data set that we can look at. And then a second is something newer that we haven't done, but that the more we think about it, the more we think we should be doing it. And that is what you might think of as a control for our alumni. So we ask alumni what they're up to. Through alumni surveys, we can ask them questions about whether they think the PhD has added value to their career trajectory, also to their life. Do they feel like they're better people for having earned the PhD? But we can also, through some of the data tracking that we do, but that we've also engaged other firms to do for us, academic analytics in particular, we can look at people who started the PhD at Princeton, but didn't finish the PhD. So nationally, only about 50% of people who start the PhD will finish it. Our numbers are much better at Princeton. It's closer to 80%, but it's not 100%. There are still, a good chunk of students who begin and don't complete. And it's possible for us to track career outcomes for those students as well. We haven't done that historically. We haven't tracked our attrited population and their career outcomes. But again, with the help of some of these firms that we've engaged, there's no reason that we couldn't. And what this helps us to see is, are there differences? What do we make of the differences? Do we think certain interventions at certain times have made differences and improved things even more than they otherwise might have looked for our PhD students? Do we think that for attrited students, they also benefit from some of the programming that has been introduced over the last few years while they were here at Princeton, even if they didn't complete the PhD? So there's a number of ways we can look at this problem. It's a bit of a complicated task, and here I will say, I hope one thing that emerges in the conversations over this week is what other good ideas are out there for assessing the actual impact of this work.
Yeah, absolutely. A big emphasis of the conference will certainly be sharing of best practices. And so we're looking forward to hearing, from lots of colleagues across the country, some of the efforts that they have underway and the ways they're thinking about assessing the impact of those efforts, for sure. When we think of sort of the second pillar, and we've talked about mobilizing all of our stakeholders and all of our 40 plus campus partners. We've also developed a professional development working group that really is sort of a coalition, a campus-wide coalition, really focused on also looking at assessment and doing sort of a gap analysis of, what are some of the programs we're offering now? Where are some programmatic opportunities for us as a campus? We're also, of course, as part of that campus-wide coalition, faculty voices are so important. We have a faculty perspective section on our website. And again, we try and partner with each of the academic departments on bespoke professional development programming. Can you frame a little bit for us the ways that we partner with the academic departments, sort of a little bit of context around the relationship between the graduate school and the departments?
Yes, let me think about that for just 1 minute. So when we realized it was important to elevate, the professional development for graduate students in many ways, including creating an associate dean level position, we thought it was important to situate this work, and we thought it was important to accept the recommendation of the task force on the future of the graduate school to situate this work in the office of the dean of the graduate school, in large part because of how graduate education itself works. Career service centers historically have served undergraduate populations. The good news is over the past decade, almost all of them have expanded their scope to include graduate students as well. But even still, because graduate students are situated in an academic department from the day they arrive on our campus, they're just fundamentally different from undergraduate students. And our best reach into them and to what they're up to is through a dean's office when it comes to the graduate population. So although students belong and live and are situated within their academic department from the day they arrive, an office of the dean of the graduate school does have some central responsibilities that we coordinate across all graduate programs. We run the admission process. We don't select who's admitted, of course, but we do control the admission process. We help departments in running that process. We have some curricular oversight. Most requirements are set at the program level, at the department level, at the graduate level. But nonetheless, we do have curricular oversight. And of course, we do all we can to make sure that our attrition rates are as low as they can, given the sizable investment that we make in PhD students, and that we're helping as many as we can complete the degree. Mm-hmm. And so given that landscape, a graduate school office is the right hub for professional development work for graduate students. It's not the only place that it should be happening. It's incredibly important that our partners in the Office of Career Development are fully engaged in this work. It's incredibly important that our partners in the writing program or in the Barras Center for Teaching and Learning or in corporate and foundation relations and so on are engaged in this work. But there has to be a central hub, a coordinating center for the work that's going on, that graduate students themselves can look to, and that faculty who advise graduate students can look to, directors of graduate studies can look to, chairs of departments can look to. And that's the role that the graduate student can play, the graduate school can play. And this central role also allows us to see what's happening across our programs. It's not the same story wherever you look, right? Different needs, different opportunities, different pressure points emerge depending on the kind of program we're talking about, because graduate education is so program specific. Again, the students are admitted to that program. Their requirements are largely set by that program. So local matters a lot. And our central position allows us to see what's different across our programs. So one example I can give you is what we call the Dean's Completion Fellowship Postgraduate Research Associate program that we have here at Princeton. It is a mouthful. We end up shortening it to an acronym the way we all do, to the DCF, Dean's Completion Fellowship, PGRA, Postgraduate Research Associate Program. The DCF PGRA program is something we only offer in the humanities and social sciences because there were special needs there with students around 6th-year funding. And in fact, not all of our social science departments participate. Economics, for example, does not opt into this program, but the rest of the social sciences do, and all the humanities departments do. And what it does is it's a vehicle by which we provide a central form of fellowship support to 6th-year students, but we also give them an incentive to complete. If they complete by a deadline, they have the opportunity to stay at Princeton as what's called a postgraduate research associate, essentially a postdoc-like appointment. And there's many things they can do with that postdoc appointment that we fund. They can continue on with their research to try and get more articles published, to be better candidates on the academic job market, for example. They can teach a course, which might also help them on the academic job market, or in many other fields where teaching is a valuable skill. They can also do some administrative work in an administrative office as a PGRA. So for example, we've had a PGRA work in the Center for Digital Humanities as a sort of program associate there. And this gives them valuable professional experience with the PhD in hand. It allows them to be better applicants on the academic job market if that's what they're interested in. It also allows them to pivot and think through how they might want to apply their skills to other fields if that's what they'd like to do. And this is something that we sort of cooked up as a 6th-year funding initiative. We've had to change and adapt it in response to COVID-19. It's now a 6th and 7th-year funding initiative, 7th-year funding initiative. We also expanded significantly the number of slots that we offer. It's now, it was 50 slots last year. It's 50 slots again this year. That's quite a bit more than we initially rolled out when we launched the program. But because of the central role that the graduate school plays, and because we do have these sort of tentacles or these spokes into the departments, we're the right place when it comes to the graduate population to think about how we help graduate programs and graduate students respond to the unique challenges for those programs and for those students.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, as you said, every department has different needs. Every student may have a different sort of lens that they're looking at in terms of the types of skills and the transferability of those skills. We've worked really closely with the directors of graduate studies and the job placement officers, thinking about professional development seminars, required internships. We're looking forward to that in sort of the next phase of Grad Futures. As we look ahead to next year, we're already partnering currently with a few of the academic departments on internship programs, one in particular, the pre-matriculation internship that we have underway with the chemical and biological engineering department, which is in a pilot phase, but definitely thinking about these creative approaches as well as required elements around professional development, such as seminars and internships. At the end of the day, there's simply no substitute for immersive experiences, for sure. And we have several fellowship programs underway currently. We have just introduced a new fellowship program, the Grad Futures Fellowship Program. I thought maybe we could take a little bit of time to sort of frame each of these individual programs, including sort of the evolution of the University Administrative Fellowships and the Community College Teaching Fellowship.
Sure. Do you want me to talk about those two things in particular?
I would love you if you could give us a little bit of framing, because these programs have been in existence for quite some time.
They have, it's true. So let me start with the University Administrative Fellowships Program, the UAF Fellowships Program. We launched that back in 2014, I believe. So this is going 7 years. This program's been around. As I said earlier, because I think it's important to give credit where credit is due. I launched this program with, again, the amazing Amy Pulzakowski when she was still in the Office of Career Services, as it was then called, and also with Sarah Schwartz from the McGrath Center for Teaching and Learning. They were important thought partners who really helped us cook up this program. But I will also say that it wasn't our own totally original idea. I was aware of some interesting things happening in this kind of space at Brown University and at the University of Chicago. I looked at what they were doing, and because we do have this sort of Ivy Plus partnership, I really benefited from the partnership on this one. And we adapted it. We changed some things about it based on what we thought was right for Princeton. So when we launched it, we had, I think, 4 students who participated in that first cohort. The goal of the program is to give PhD students a learning and internship-like opportunity with an administrative office here at the university. Semester long, they're paired with someone who typically has a PhD themselves, but works in an administrative role here at the university. It allows them to see different kinds of things that people with PhDs do. It allows them to get some direct mentorship from them, to sit in on meetings with them, to explore their network, and to get some work experience on a particular project or small set of projects, so that they get a real flavor for what administrative work looks like and what people with PhDs in an academic setting who are not faculty do. Mm-hmm. So that program has grown a lot since we launched GradFUTURES, which just is another example of why we really needed to launch GradFUTURES. I think, boy, there's dozens and dozens of students every year participating in it at this point, and the network of hosts who host our PhD students is quite large. So that's really all credit to you and Amy and James. The Community College Teaching Fellowship, again, was the kind of brainchild of Sarah Schwartz, Amy Pulzakowski, and me. And this is where we knew, teaching is one of these inherently transferable skills. Graduate students have an opportunity to really gain skills in this area. At Princeton, for the most part, they don't teach their own class. There's a real premium on faculty engagement with undergraduates. So graduate students typically serve as what we call assistants in instruction, which means that they assist faculty who are teaching the courses, but faculty still have primary responsibility for the undergraduate teaching. And local community colleges, besides offering our graduate students the opportunity to teach a course on their own, also have faculty who could mentor our graduate students in the kinds of teaching that prior to COVID-19, they were less likely to have practice in or exposure to, online teaching in particular. And at the same time, this would expose our students to different kinds of students, community college students, adult learners, and so on. So we launched that one with terrific partners at Mercer County Community College. It's since grown to include Rowan and Camden. So there are 3 partners, but this is just another example where we've had some good ideas ourselves, but boy, have we relied on terrific partners across campus and terrific partners external to Princeton who care about the professional development of our graduate students.
Absolutely. And later this week, we'll hear from the community college teaching partners, in particular from Rowan College of South Jersey, this is an institution that we just launched last year. Brendan Rickards, who's the provost there, and Natalka Pawolski, who's a professor there, actually helped us to establish that partnership, which is wonderful. And they'll be here to speak a little bit to the impact of that in their community. As well, the University Administrative Fellows. Last year, there were 48 those fellows, which, to your point, dozens and dozens across campus. But I think more importantly, a big part of this is the mentorship that program provides, and knowing that you have this sort of campus-wide ecosystem of mentors at every corner of campus who now are working closely with our graduate students in their professional development. And it's mutually reinforcing because the graduate student UAFs, we've had 2 that have created unique professional development programs. Hannah Stamler in the Center for Digital Humanities established, working closely with Meredith Martin, and Rebecca Munson established the How We Work series. So, graduate students can get even a closer look at the ways other PhDs all across campus are using their doctoral training in administrative settings. So yes, all of these things underway, really important to have these experiences. As far as the GradFUTURES Fellowship program, that's a brand new program that we established this year. And again, sort of flexibility is the watchword here. We know that graduate students, have so many, constraints on their time. They have so much that they're doing in terms of their research and their writing. So there's a lot on their plates, but to find ways that we can introduce, in manageable sort of timing and flexible settings, having these types of opportunities. These are highly curated, funded social impact fellowships that where the graduate student will, again, also similar to the UAF and the community college teaching program, have a mentor that they will be working very closely alongside. They'll be working on mission-driven projects. You'll hear a lot more about these programs throughout the course of the forum. Anne-Marie Slaughter, former dean of the Princeton School of International Affairs, will be with us, and she'll talk about the partnership with New America Foundation, and as well Jim Moore, CEO of the Washington Institute, will be with us to launch their new fellowship. So we have about 7 graduate students who are immersed in these opportunities at nonprofits in the New Jersey area, as well as across the country. And so we're really excited about these new opportunities. We talked a lot about data. And the next 2 pillars of our strategy are integrally connected to both alumni and data. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the ways that we are really focused on engaging and re-engaging with our graduate alumni and partnering with them in terms of professional development. And we kind of really think of this as, you pointed to this earlier, that, the experience of a graduate student is fundamentally different than an undergraduate student. And, one of the things that I observed in my prior role was that, there are these amazing intergenerational networks that have long existed for our undergraduate students. And we really wanted to see, how could we really deepen the connection between graduate students and our graduate alumni. And so we look at it in sort of this sort of 3-phased approach, beginning with systematic contact, having the panels and the speakers, asynchronous videos, networking events, all of that. Last year, we had about 137, 140 or so graduate alumni that were engaged in our programs. Developing curated networks of mentors, paired based on similar affiliations or interests and identities to support our graduate students. Last year, we launched the Mentor Collective mentorship program. Today at 4 o'clock, actually, we'll have a session focused on that program. And there were about 100 mentor pairs last year. And we learned a lot about the value of having sort of a base of mentors for graduate students. So in addition to their faculty advisors, having graduate alumni mentors and others who are really centrally in their corner and can provide this sort of advice and ongoing mentorship. Organic connections start to hopefully form based on systematic contact, curated networks, and really just because we're seeding these conversations and relationships and connections. So we have our LinkedIn group currently underway with about 700 plus members on LinkedIn, where again, they post news and events and questions. And so there's that sort of engagement as well. Cole, you're a graduate alum. What can you share about the value of these types of mentorship?
So I guess two thoughts on that one. First, I myself benefited from some faculty advisors who were very open to the idea that I might want to pursue different kinds of careers than a strictly tenure track trajectory. In part, they had to be because the job market in Russian literature, in the early 2000s, looked much worse than it does even now, if you can imagine. But they were very open to that, and in fact, my experience is almost all of our faculty are. There's sometimes hesitancy on the part of graduate students to raise this topic of conversation with their faculty mentors, but as I know, and as you know, Eva, through our individualized outreach to departments, faculty are on board with the notion that graduate students should take the graduate training that they receive and apply it wherever they think it will make them happy and successful professionally, and where they think it will make the greatest contributions. So I think we're well past the point where faculty are resistant to this idea. I think sometimes graduate students themselves are still, a bit hesitant to bring it up because sometimes they themselves or their peers may think that's the most desirable career outcome. But I think faculty are very open to this. Mine were even back when I finished up in the early 2000s. So that was one important mentor I had. I had, a faculty advisor, Olga Peters-Hasey, and a chair and a DGS, Carol Emerson and Michael Wachtel, who were totally on board with the notion that if I went off to Harvard as an administrator, that was a very good career outcome and would make good use of my skills. The second set of mentors that I had was actually in the residential college system here at Princeton. So when I was a graduate student, there was a position available only to graduate students that was essentially what you might think of as an assistant head of college. We have the heads of the residential colleges, and there used to be a position that was an assistant to that person. This was before we had directors of student life within the residential colleges. I was the assistant to the head of Rockefeller College, and it was a 20 hour per week employment. So it was in my more advanced years. And in fact, there were complicated things that had to happen with my enrollment back then. There's a good number of reasons we don't have a program like this now. Among others, people with actual professional preparation in student life should be in those roles rather than someone like I was, who didn't exactly have that preparation. But boy, was it terrific experience for me. And among other things, it gave me a network of mentors. I realized that there were people who worked in the office, in the residential college office, who were PhDs and who decided to apply their graduate level training to different kinds of careers rather than traditional academic careers. So I got terrific mentorship from them. And I will say that's one of the reasons that I was so passionate about the University Administrative Fellows back when we launched that in 2014. I had benefited from real mentorship and real work experience and exposure within an administrative office on campus, and it made a real difference in my own career. And I thought, if there are other graduate students who would benefit from that, we should be giving them that opportunity. Mentors matter.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you've also played a role in the mentorship task force on campus. And so that will be again, a big focus of the conference will be, the mentorship programs. There's another mentorship program underway within the neuroscience department. So we'll talk a little bit about that throughout the conference as well. But yes, it's so important. Also equally important and also very much top of mind, we think about alumni outcomes, right? When we think of alumni. And again, we've had a lot of emphasis on data, the different ways that we look at data to make data informed decisions, as well as, again, just sort of increasing the visibility and the understanding of graduate alumni career outcomes data, and highlighting those outcomes in ways that are equitable across different industry sectors, and using sort of equitable language. You've heard me say many times in our conversations, the term non-academic always just sort of seems so negative to me. And, we want to really frame things as, diverse careers and all paths welcome. And certainly all paths meaningful. Illuminating the skills that are in demand and the competencies needed to provide on-ramps to those diverse careers, really important as well. You framed in the homepage article a lot of big questions that involve, sort of thinking about what PhDs actually do. What can you share in terms of, our goals at the graduate school around data transparency and the evolution of really emphasizing these partnerships with academic analytics and Burning Glass?
Yeah. So you're referring to the kind of 4 questions that I always invoke when we're thinking about professional development work. The first one actually doesn't have too much directly to do with career outcomes data. The first question is, what's the actual educational value of the process of earning the PhD, separate from whatever the subject matter expertise that the student develops may be. But let's set that one aside and focus instead on the other 3. So the other 3 questions that I invoke with some regularity are, first, what is it that our PhD alumni actually do with the PhD? We've done a lot of work in that regard. We did some through homegrown efforts, and we partnered with academic analytics to do a lot more, and not just with our PhD students. We've started tracking our master's students quite methodically as well. The second question specifically about data is, do they need the degree to do that thing, right? And this is where looking at accredited students as a control can be quite valuable. So, we sometimes fall into the trap of talking about a PhD as if it's simply a bigger and better version of a liberal arts education. When we talk about liberal arts education, a bachelor's degree, students can do many, many things with a bachelor's degree. I don't think we should talk about a PhD in quite the same way, because if that's all it is, well, they might have stopped at the bachelor's degree and gone on to do all those many different things. So do they actually need a PhD to do the thing that they're doing? Is it true value added? And then the third question, which is a kind of variation on the second, is if they don't technically need it, in other words, if labor market doesn't say you must have a PhD to do this job, are they nonetheless better off for having the PhD? Are they more successful in their career? Do they go further? Do they also see own value added that only they are aware of? Do they think their own life is better? Do they think their profession is better? Do they think society at large is better? Do we think that's the case as well, even if they didn't technically need the PhD to get that job in the first place? Those are the sort of questions that I think we have to focus on when we're thinking about outcomes. Thank goodness we have some terrific partners in academic analytics and Burning Glass Technologies who can help us think about these things in more rigorous ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll be hearing from Molly Wilson from Academic Analytics. She'll be sharing a program called Understanding the Pathways to the Professoriate. So really, again, just thinking big picture, all paths welcome. What are the realities right now? What are our students, what do our students really need to think about when it comes to the pathway to the professoriate? And with respect to Burning Glass Technologies, right after this session, we'll have a session with Chantel Filiari, who will be giving us a sort of behind the scenes tour of the Labor Insights tool that we're using. So lots of different ways that we're looking at data for sure. As far as the Grad Futures initiative, we've spent a lot of time designing customized presentations for all of the different departments, providing these overviews of 10 years worth of graduate alumni outcomes data. Thank goodness, for academic analytics, helping us to find those outcomes. And then frame them and sort of categorize them by industry and skills. And then the labor market insights, sort of marrying those two lenses. What are our alumni doing today? And then what is the demand? And where are these emerging fields and skills that we will need to cultivate? The departmental dashboard, so making sure that we're providing access to all of this information, both at the departmental level and for our students more broadly. So we're developing these customized dashboards for each department that will include expanded data and industry classifications to really, again, frame bigger picture. We also just established a pilot of graduate department web pages with outcomes overviews, again, very specific to their department, the labor market insights, and then just profiles of graduate alumni. Really, the richness is really in understanding the stories and the personal perspectives, of how did you get from point A to point B, and what really sparked your interest in this area. Understanding that is really important. And, really the faculty profiles as well, as I mentioned, so important to gaining buy-in. One of the questions in the chat was, how do you gain buy-in for all of these programs among the graduate students themselves and the departments? Well, I do think it is taking this personalized approach. So I think with that, we may have some questions. We have a little bit of time for Q&A, but I thought I'd land on this final slide. Based on the alumni outcomes, information, gleaned over surveys and anecdotal data, as well as information from Burning Glass, we've sort of landed on what are some of the success factors? What are some of the things that we'll want to look at across the trajectory of one's career? Well, leaning into the discipline-specific knowledge, that's a no-brainer, of course. That's something we have to do. And then building those interdisciplinary skills and competencies. That's certainly a critical part of professional development. Individual strengths and interests. Later on today at noon, we'll hear from Capfinity about really how do you understand your realized and unrealized strengths as an individual and apply those to your professional development. Mentorship will be part of the conversation. Experiences, so having a really sort of unique portfolio of differentiating experiences is also something that we hear from both alumni as well as from some of the trends that we're seeing in terms of labor market. And what are they asking for in some of the job descriptions? What are some of the skills and experiences they're asking for? I think at the end of the day, the lifelong learning and adaptability is probably the biggest piece, and we'll certainly be talking about adaptability and pivoting and recalculating quite a bit during the conference. Cole, it's always such a pleasure to chat with you, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today to welcome everyone to the conference. We'll just pause here and say thank you to everyone for joining us, and we'll look to James Van Wyk, who I believe is looking at the chat to see if there are any questions from our audience.
Okay, but yeah, the questions are teed up in the Q&A. The first has to do with, comes from Sal Cipriano, who I know is from Boston College. Hi, Sal. Sal says, these initiatives are all amazing. However, I'm wondering how you generated interest and buy-in from the students themselves, especially in regards to career diversity initiatives. Sal, I think, along with Cole touched on this point, says, I find that faculty are perhaps somewhat surprisingly, increasingly receptive to careers beyond the academy, but that students, in particular in the humanities and social sciences, are actually less so. Great question from Sal. How do we get that buy-in from graduates?
Sure. So I think one of the ways, we have established a close partnership with graduate students. We actually have professional development associates assigned by division who work really closely in liaising with the departments within their division, and also just sort of serving as ambassadors for professional development and spreading the word. I think that's part of the conversation. I think it's also these mentorship programs, really having graduate students in conversation with graduate alums so that they can understand all of the meaningful ways that they can apply their doctoral training. And when you see those individual graduate alum stories and you can build those connections, sometimes, again, you build that buy-in. Cole, any thoughts on that?
Sal is not wrong. It is something that I had alluded to as well, which is increasingly, I would say, the toughest resistance we sometimes face in the humanities and social sciences in particular is not from faculty, it's from some graduate students themselves and the peer pressure that is sometimes exerted among peer groups where there's one kind of desired outcome. But I think to your point, Eva, having student ambassadors, bringing grad alumni back, having departments bring grad alumni back, that's incredibly powerful, so that the students see that their own faculty see this as a desirable and valuable outcome. That says a lot to the individual graduate student. And then I think data transparency matters here a lot. I think it's important before they even arrive on our campuses to know what it is that our graduate students do with their graduate degree. And that's why we did such a push a few years ago to put this data out there at the divisional level, not just graduate school overall, but here's what our PhDs in the humanities do. Here's what our PhDs in the social sciences do, engineering and natural sciences, so that applicants themselves can see what it is that our alumni do.
Yeah, absolutely. And later on this week, on Friday, we'll have a wonderful conversation between University Trustee Ann Kirshner and the Executive Director of the MLA, Paula Krebs, focused on career diversity efforts, in particular for our humanities students and humanities alumni.
Eva, I have to jump off. I am sorry to say I have a 10 a.m., but I know if there's more questions, the participants are in your good hands. I just want to say thank you so much again for all the work that you and Amy and James and the GradFUTURES team, including all of the students who are involved in GradFUTURES do. I think it's making a tremendous impact.
Thank you so much, Cole. And we'll look forward to seeing you again at one of the future sessions of the conference. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, James, I think we have probably time for maybe one more question.
Certainly. So we've got one. Anonymous attendee asks, are UAF applicants overrepresented by certain departments over others, or is the program too young to know? What departments might need more effort to attract successful UAFs from a range of departments?
You know what? I might ask that you address that question since you manage our UAF program.
Well, here I am in the flesh.
Hello.
Well, thanks,
Welcome,
anonymous
James
attendee.
Van Wyk, Assistant Dean for Graduate Student Professional Development, and primarily works with humanities and social sciences, but also manages all of our strategic communications.
So it's a great question, because the question presupposes or at least suggests that the anonymous attendee surmises that there might be certain departments to which these opportunities would appealing and others not so much. We have actually not found that to be the case, because we partner with such a range of campus hosts or mentor offices for our UAF program, ranging from the Office of Information Technology to advancement, to alumni relations, to the Center for Digital Humanities, as Eva alluded to earlier. We can find or create a fellowship arrangement, I'm thinking too of the Princeton University Press, that is appealing to graduate students regardless of department. I still have as my white whale the Department of Math. I don't think we've ever had somebody out of math doing a UAF. But other than that, we're pretty much very well represented across all of our 42 PhD granting departments. So great question, anonymous attendee. Eva, I'll pose you one more as we hit the 10 o'clock hour. Just remind everybody that we have a session coming up at 11. The link to RSVP is in the chat.
Yes.
Anonymous attendee again asks, I'm a Princeton grad alum. It is incredible that you've initiated and established a huge variety of programs in a short period of time, aiming to assist graduate students looking for alternative career paths. I'm wondering, Anonymous asks, if you have seen struggles among those graduate students who consider careers outside of academia. Example, do they see themselves failures by not staying in academia as expected? And if so, how do you help? Thank you.
Sure. Well, again, I think this is very much a personal perspective, and there has been an evolution over time in terms of, again, broadening the impact and reach of the PhD across different fields. And really, I think as far as the struggles, what we would think to do would be immediately to try and connect that student with a graduate alum or multiple graduate alums who are working in diverse industries and fields, so that they can, again, maybe perhaps connect them with our mentorship program so that they can be in conversation with someone who might have faced these struggles themselves and figure out, what is the sort of path for them, right? It is an individual and a personal choice and decision. And that's really where agency and autonomy comes into play, right? And so that's an important part of this conversation as well throughout the week. So I think one of the ways that we would address that would be it would be more of a personal approach to trying to illuminate with data, as well as sharing some individual stories that are, asynchronous, perhaps, content in terms of videos and so forth, but then trying to pair someone one-on-one with a grad alum who might have experienced a similar challenge. And hopefully in that, building that community, building that connection, that also helps to build the clarity and the confidence for that student moving forward. Thank you all so much for joining us for this welcome session. Thank you for hopping in, James Van Wyk, to help us bring home the session. We look forward to seeing everyone again at 11 o'clock with our session with Burning Glass and throughout all of the sessions this week. Thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing you at our next session. Bye-bye.